Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Unscripted roots. My name is Matt Weber, and I am a preceptor on education, running the Voice program, the Communication Fellows, and Double Take. And I wholeheartedly welcome you to the afternoon special gathering of Double Take. This is literally my favorite hour of the semester, and I hope it will be yours as well. I cannot promise you all the excitement and passion of a Game 7 in the World Series, but I can assure you there'll be fewer rain delays. So why an afternoon of story? Well, in addition to being one of the oldest and most timeless and universal pedagogical practices, we like how a good story makes us feel, how they enrich a community and tell us something more about an individual, who they are, how they identify, and where they come from. What is special about Double Take and the 8 stories from the HGSE community you are about to hear is that these stories do more than just tell, but I'll argue they profoundly show. A good story transcends and shows an emotion, a feeling, a place in time, a mood, and these storytellers are equally story showers, walking us by hand into the more visible depths of identity, experience, striving to connect in our shared humanity. So maybe in listening and being open to feeling in this packed Asquith Hall, there could be a collective prospect of healing, of hope, or of deeper understanding. Now, I can keep telling you how meaningful story is, or I can try and show you, which is what I choose to do today. I do prefer a different mood. Lighting for story time, I feel, is important. So I think they recently installed a clapper in Asquith Hall. We'll see if it works. Okay, that's cool. I think it's the Saul Zantz clapper. And now I'm kind of out of the light, so I'm going to go over here and just take this. I may return over here, but in the words of Homer, and to kick us off, sing to me, O Muse, here is my quest story. So I was always one of these kids growing up that just really wanted to be a dad. It was an awkward first date conversation. But it was one of those things where even in college, some people said, Matt, what do you want to do? What field do you want to work in? And I said, and I answered like a 6-year-old little boy. I said, I want to work as a higher education administrator so that when my kids are older, they can get free tuition remission and I can take them out to lunch every week. And that's how I felt. And here I am at this institution as a higher education person now. And here I am many years later from when that conversation happened. And sure enough, I meet the love of my life. I get married. And we have this moment where we say, okay, for lack of a better term, you want to make a kid together? And the answer was yes. So the two of us tried for a good year. And we were unsuccessful in getting pregnant. So we went to the doctors and we said, we're both, relatively young and healthy. What's going on here? I know there's a bunch of things that can be clogged or various things need, swimming lessons and whatnot. And we wanted the medical professionals to let us know. And they looked at us and said, you know what, you're good. Everything about you on all these tests checks out. You guys are totally fine. So, just, keep trying. So we kept trying. And then we went back, and nothing was coming from it. So they said, okay, well, we're going to actually diagnose you with something right now. And they said, you have unexplained infertility, which to me is very descriptive. But as a marketing professional as well, I was not impressed with the creativity in that diagnosis. And I'm thinking, like, at the Mayo Clinic, they're sitting around the room thinking, okay, we can't explain their infertility. Bob, what do you want to call it? Unexplained infertility. Okay. Let's put it in the book. So at around this same time, another Harvard person that you may all know, Mark Zuckerberg, made a very infamous and very famous Facebook post, or as he calls it, a post. And it started with, Priscilla and I are pregnant. And it was actually a beautiful thing because it wasn't just that we're pregnant and here's that photo you see in all your news feeds, but it was Mark opening up in a way that said, hey, this wasn't easy. We had 3 miscarriages to get to this point, and it was tough. It's tough, the hope and the hope lost. So, he put it out there. And I rarely pity a billionaire. And in this particular case, I really felt bad for Mark and Priscilla. And I thought, geez, we think we've had it, kind of tough going, but that seems like it's really tough. And shortly after that post that Mark made, my wife and I, we got pregnant. And it was a sort of like, great, all's better, it was a fight. And then, shortly after the pregnancy, there's loss, and it's definitely sad. But we were resilient, and we kept trying in different ways. And certainly, the second time around, we got pregnant again, not too long after the first one. And I kept thinking, well, this is good. This is good. We're not going to tell as many people this time. Because having that call with your mom or your dad saying, when we were super excited, a couple weeks ago, that's kind of gone now. So we didn't tell as many people. We did tell our parents, and unfortunately, we did have to have that conversation again with a second miscarriage, and it was definitely hard. So at this point, I'm a man of faith. I typically would look to the book, the good book, the Bible, and there's actually a good number of fertility stories in the Bible, if you can believe it. Old and New Testament. There's Abraham and Isaac and Sarah, and then there's also Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother. But I think what brought me most solace was the book of Mark Zuckerberg, which was back to that post. It was back to that post that Mark shared that, it really struck me. And I remember telling my wife, I said, there's really nothing more we can do at this point, even if we had $1 billion. Even if we had all the doctors in Silicon Valley, across the East Coast, across the world. This isn't something that's picky in who it chooses. And it's not a money thing, and it's not a resource thing. And the interesting thing is I always felt this kinship to Mark Zuckerberg. He's about my age. We both met our wives at Harvard. We love Pinocchio's pizza. And we both have net worths that exceed $34,000. I feel like I've walked in his shoes or worn his hoodie. And I reread Mark's post, and I don't know how he coped, but the way I cope, I live near the Mystic River, and I got out my kayak, and I go down the Mystic in my kayak, and I was haunted by that final line of The Great Gatsby, which is, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. And I was wondering whether that would be our situation. Now, time raced on. We kept trying. We got pregnant a third time, which was fantastic. And then we lost the baby again. Our third miscarriage. And let me tell you something. When you feel like every statistical explanation, every Google search is against you, you start feeling like you don't have hope. You don't have a light. And that you're pretty much in the pits. And by the way, it's miscarriage, so don't talk about it. And you're a guy too, so definitely don't talk about it. And the previous event just like this occurred in May. Double take 1. This is double take 2. And I remember sitting back there like a sad Eeyore, looking like a harried hipster Christopher Robin, just really in a bad spot. And sure enough, our inaugural double take storyteller, our dean, Jim Ryan, gets up and shares his story. And it's a story about him being adopted. And it just oozed with love. And he told in a way where he loved his parents so much and they loved him so much. For what I'd always thought was kind of like our plan B, you know what? Sure sounded like a hell of a good plan A. And I went back that night and I Googled how to adopt in Massachusetts. And I chatted with my wife. I said, this whole adoption thing, something clicked to me today. I don't think this is something we should look as a plan A or a plan B. It should be a plan A. So I said, let's go at it, both directions. And we kept at it. And I started focusing on the penultimate line in Gatsby. On those kayak rides. It eluded us, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster. We will stretch our arms farther. And one fine morning. Those past few years for me, my sisters gave birth to three children. We went to 7 baptisms and 4 baby showers. And every time we turned on cable, we somehow ended up on the 16 and Pregnant Marathon. And I stand before all of you, not naive to putting ending to my story here, but in a way to thank the storytellers that I use story to help get me through what was essentially a very difficult part of my life, something that I really couldn't talk about or share with so many people, but something that I'd always thought about, this journey up the current to parenthood, to fatherhood for myself. And to be honest with you, I need to thank the Ryans and the Fitzgeralds and the Zuckerbergs for putting it out there. And I also want to end the story too, that the next bend for me in this river on my little kayak up that current did have a very interesting surprise. On one fine morning, 21 weeks ago, the unexplained was somehow explained. And sitting here in this room, in what I consider the best seat in the house, is my wife with our 21-week pregnant baby. I don't know how this happened. Beating 150 beats per minute back there, 10 fingers, 10 toes, all the stuff that you hope for. Healthy growing. In each week, that child runs faster and stretches its arms out further until that one fine morning. And this week, according to the internet, that baby can hear stuff outside the wound, outside the womb. And I just want to tell my kids sitting back there, I hope you enjoyed the first story. It is your story. Thank you.
I didn't hear the word transgender until I was in college. I moved to Boston. It was the only first city I'd ever lived in, aside from my hometown. And I had a hard time adjusting. By my second year, I still didn't really have like a crew of people that made me feel really excited about being here and being in this space. And someone that I knew from a class invited me to go to a poetry club. And I was like, I don't know about this, like, poetry. I don't know what that is. I've never seen it. I don't know. But I went, and within 30 minutes, I was floored. I had like 5 new crushes. I was really just so amazed by the honesty in the stories that these people were telling, the raw emotion that went into them, the diversity of voices and different people that were in the room and in that space and all there for each other. And I just was so excited. I said, whatever that is, I want to do that. And I want to be in this space. And so I started taking some poetry classes and started going to open mics and just like trying it. And at the same time was still going through a lot of changes with my own personal identity. And I didn't quite have a language for it at the time, but was really uncomfortable identifying as female. Was really uncomfortable portraying myself to the world as a female-identified person. And I guess that this was somewhat obvious to some people that were close to me. And one night a friend of mine privately just said, you know, if you ever want me to call you something else, like by a different name, that would be okay. And I didn't have a response then. I just cried. I just cried at the idea that it was okay. It was not something that I hadn't thought about. I just didn't know. And I went home and did some thinking and realized that I'd been thinking about it for 20 years. And the next day texted her one word, Ethan. And it was really like looking at myself in the mirror saying Ethan, it was really like I recognized myself for the first time. And so it was kind of a big deal. And so I was set to perform in my first poetry slam that weekend, and was like, I just made this huge decision. I want to stick by it. It's like the most right that anything has ever felt. I can't go up on stage as my old name. But I also was pretty awkward and was like, there's no way I'm going to talk to all those people in the next 3 days and tell them that sounds terrible. So I just decided to do it there. It's like, they're all going to be there. I'll just do it there. So we get to the show, and I'm sitting in a circle with the other people who are competing, and the host is going around asking us our names, and by the time he gets to me, I say Ethan. And my friends that are in the room with me, Like, look at me, and I just see this physical shift in that, without words, we are here with you, and we're moving forward, which is exactly what I needed in that moment. Not the least of which because we all had to perform poems in like the next 10 minutes. So that obviously wasn't the end of the story with those particular individuals, but for that night, it was really being in that room and a part of that community was really transformative. And I went up on stage as Ethan that night, as I've done ever since. And one of the things that I love about my name is that I was originally named for my father's great aunt, Emily Walker. And she lived most of her life right outside of Boston, and she also wrote poetry and performed it on stages. It was the 1800s, so it looked a little bit different back then. And I really loved that lineage and that part of my name, and I wanted to keep her with me as I moved into this next phase of my life. So I decided to take her last name as my middle name. So Ethan Walker Smith. That's my name.
Whenever I go home and ask my dad, where do you want to eat today? My treat. Regardless of whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, I always get the same response: IHOP. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, IHOP, otherwise known as the International House of Pancakes, is a fine establishment. You can get as many pancakes as you want for a reasonable price, and they're pretty delicious. I appreciate it. But the reason he chooses IHOP isn't because he loves pancakes. It's because for him, it's the embodiment of the American dream. He came here from India in the 70s and worked as a dishwasher at IHOP in the night shift. And that's where he learned that with discipline and hard work, you can go a long way. And he used this discipline when he was raising us. When he was watching the news, if I would run across the TV, he would throw a shoe at me. If I made a 98 on a test, he would ask, where did those other 2 points go? But regardless of being a disciplinarian, I always knew that he loved me. I'm from Texas, and my father came to every square dance. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen a room full of second graders try to square dance, but taking the time out of your day to come do that is true love. When nobody wanted to coach my 5th grade soccer team, he stepped up to the plate, even though he had a full-time job, and said, let's do it. Ironically, we were named Team Ghana, and we just got pummeled week after week by Italy and Colombia and Brazil and Germany, but he stuck with it. And 2 weeks before my 21st birthday, our relationship changed considerably. He had a massive stroke in his early 50s. And that was not a part of his American dream. He had to relearn all of the things he had once learned how to do as an infant and a child. And I took the year off to be right there with him. He had to relearn my name. He had to relearn how to eat with a spoon, how to sit in a chair for longer than 20 minutes, how to stand, how to take his first few steps. And I was just floored by him as a patient and by seeing how resilient patients can be in the face of a considerable amount of adversity. Last year I got married, and he practiced for months to make sure that we could have the father-daughter dance I always dreamed of. He practiced with his therapist. He practiced with my sister, my future husband, anybody he could get his hands on. He also spent over a year on my wedding present. which was this book that he typed using only his right hand. It's pretty funny. Nobody be sad. It's filled with all the lessons that he wanted me to learn and keep in mind long after he's gone. My favorite is the lesson after chapter 3, which states, choosing your college is more important than choosing your husband. Keep in mind that this was my wedding present. And we were reading it on my honeymoon. But these experiences are what drive me to do what I do today. And I'm a pediatrician, and I work to be the best pediatrician that I can be and be the best advocate for my patients. And I came to the ed school primarily to learn how to pass this along to other medical students, residents, other healthcare personnel, because it's so important to me that we advocate for our patients in whatever way we can. Whether it's stopping in the middle of taking a history because your patient is shivering and looks cold to go grab a blanket, or taking it a step further and seeing an infant accidentally drink e-cigarette fluid in the emergency room and go to the state house to improve safety regulations. I want people to advocate in whatever way they can for their patients, because you never know what they've been through, where they're coming from. And that patient is someone's daughter, someone's nephew, someone's granddaughter, or someone's father. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Williams, and I'm a first-year student in the EDLD program. And back in August, about a week or so before classes began, I got a package in the mail. And inside the package was this kind of fancy-looking box, and inside the box was this pen and a note. And the note read, "A first semester at Harvard is too important for note-taking with a disposable pen. I am proud of what you have and are continuing to accomplish. Now go forth and change the world. I love you, Jamie." Jamie's my brother, my big brother. And as my big brother, he was always something of a hero to me. You know, he always did everything first. Going to school for the first time was not scary because he'd done it. He told me where to sit, what to expect. And we had kind of a like Norman Rockwell type childhood. We were both altar boys, Boy Scouts. Sports was very important. Our parents were always around. And we were both fairly high achievers. My brother participated in debate. You know, long before I was ever here, as a high school student, he participated in and often won debate tournaments here at Harvard. As a freshman in high school, he was the state champion in extemporaneous speech. At the tournament, the state tournament, he was voted best overall debater and went on to nationals as a freshman and took third. While not as intellectually gifted as my brother, he definitely is the smart one, I had a few markers of achievement myself. I won a state football championship with my dad as the coach. It was kind of cool. I was a violinist, and I was in the all-state orchestra, 7th and 8th grade. And then my freshman year, 9th grade, I was accepted into the Rhode Island Junior Philharmonic. And it was that same year, my freshman year, at Christmas, literally 2 days after Christmas, at Andy's Pizza in Peckville, Pennsylvania, on a Friday night, my parents told us that they were separating. And in an instant, that perfect picture of American childhood just went up in flames. It was a pizza place. It was a Friday night. We had ordered. And I started crying. My parents did nothing. And my brother took me outside. And we stood in this alley behind Andy's Pizza with the snow coming down as I cried. And the next week, 2 different kids returned to high school. We were just different. I never played organized sports ever again, and I never picked up my violin ever again. I went from a straight A student to a C-level student, and I was in detention every single day of high school. And my brother's drop was a bit more precipitous. 2 years later, as his peers from that debate team were getting ready to go off to Columbia and UPenn and Harvard, my brother had dropped out of school. And the thing that gets me about this story every time I tell it is that in the 2 years between Andy's Pizza and my brother dropping out, not one single adult in that building ever asked us what was wrong. We were literally cast adrift, and nobody cared. My brother literally drifted out of the school. And he never got back on track. He never went to college. He joined the military. I mean, he's doing okay, but by his own admission, he has never reached his potential. I did go to college, and 8 years after Andy's Pizza, I met Irma DeRico. Irma has this crazy hair and these huge platform heels. And she was the first adult in 8 years who demonstrated to me unconditional positive regard. And I would not have called it that back then, but that's what it was. She told me and demonstrated to me that I had value that went beyond what I contributed to any of her classes. I had value, and I didn't realize that. And she showed it to me. She connected me to something higher than myself, which was theater. And through theater, I started working with kids. And with working with kids, I went back to school and became a social worker. And through social work, I got into education, and now I'm here. And I have this pen. And I take notes with it. And I carry it with me. And I carry my brother with me. And he inspires me. And my work today focuses on those kids that most adults wish would just drift away. And I'm not okay with that. And I'm committed to not letting one more kid drift away. Thank you.
I like that ramp. It's so ADA compliant. I love it. Now, I'd like to preface my story by saying that I acquired this sexy wheelchair halfway through my junior year of high school. Now, my story begins in the hospital. This was about a month into inpatient at NYU Rusk. I had sustained my spinal cord injury, and I was studying for the SAT. And at this point, the doctor, the head of the pediatric unit, comes in, sees him studying, and tells me not to bother. In fact, not to bother with college. And I was kind of offended by that, mostly because at the time, my GPA, my high school GPA put me in the top 1% of students from Stuyvesant High School, which is this pressure cooker of a math and science high school in New York City. So I told my dad what the doctor had said, and his response was, "You should apply to Harvard." And I thought, okay, sure, no one in my family had gone to Harvard, but you know, what the hey. So I applied, in addition to 7 other schools, because one does not apply to Harvard without, a safety net. And so when I went back to high school for my senior year, I would talk to other students about college, and the responses I got ranged from, but how are you going to get in anywhere? You missed a whole semester. And I said, well, yeah, but I had a medical excuse, and also I was taking AP courses in the hospital, so I wasn't exactly goofing off. And some students would say, oh, you're so lucky, you're in a wheelchair, you've got affirmative action, you're gonna have the best personal essay topic ever, you're gonna get in everywhere. And then some students completely ignore the whole college thing, and they would say completely poorly thought out things like, but can you have sex? And honestly, if you need to ask me that, then you clearly lack imagination, and I feel sorry for you. So anyway, I applied to 8 schools, and I got into 7 of them, one of them being Harvard, yay. But I had to go visit the schools to make sure that they would be good for me and Snazzy being my wheelchair. So first I visited Columbia. Since I'm from New York, it was the closest one to my house. And my goodness, the number of stairs and staircases at that campus. At one point, I saw there was just, it looked like there would be a flat area, but there were just 2 to 3 steps, and this wooden plank on top of them that the tour guide had the audacity to call a ramp. And I thought, oh no, if I can pick this up and whack you over the head with it, it's not a ramp. And so there was also, I don't know why, because Columbia is an urban campus, there was a stretch of cobblestones just in the middle of the campus. And I asked the tour guide, well, how do wheelchair-using students get around? And he said, oh, they manage. And at that point, some divine being answered my question for me, because I saw a student in a motorized wheelchair go across the cobblestones. And you could see the chair was just bouncing and jostling along there. And I was 90% sure that a screw was going to fall out of that chair. It did not look good. And so I decided, okay, I'm not going to go here for school. And I visited another school whose disability services told me that I would be in a dorm that happened to be at the bottom of a particularly steep hill. And I asked them, well, why would I be there? And they said, oh, well, it's next to a food court. Wouldn't you like that? And I thought, well, I'd like to be on top of the hill where there are other dormitories and other food courts and also the classrooms and the library. And so I did not go there. So when I visited Harvard, I was shown a dorm that was really close to the dining hall, really close to the science center, which is also where the freshmen got their mail, and really close to the history building, which was great for me because I ended up concentrating or majoring in history. And looking back, I had an amazing 4 years as an undergrad at Harvard, and I am so glad that I listened to my dad instead of the doctor. Thank you.
Hola, mi nombre es Adán González, and my first message has to be to my parents. Mamá y papá, yo estoy muy orgulloso de mis raíces de migrante. Estoy muy orgulloso de ser su hijo, que ustedes siempre sacrificaron y se esforzaron por darnos una mejor vida. Todas esas experiencias me han dado la confianza y la fe de seguir cargando nuestro sueño americano. Y un mensaje pequeño para toda mi gente humilde, trabajadora, inmigrante. Ustedes tienen valor. Desde que seas desde el paletero, el cementero, la persona que limpia casas, el jardinero, nosotros tenemos valor. Y ese sacrificio que siempre, constantemente siguen haciendo, se hace en el corazón de este país. Y como yo, hay muchos jóvenes que siguen ese ejemplo y van a levantar nuestras voces. Vamos a seguir batallando como comunidad, pero vamos a seguir creciendo y ser ese gigante que de verdad representa de quiénes somos. Somos luchadores y sí se puede. My story is not unique. My story is not mine alone. When I was 6 years old, my dad was shot 5 times and dragged away from me. Although I don't remember the tears, I do remember picking up his boots. When I was 8 years old, I started working my first real job at the local flea market, selling Coca-Colas, Doritos, and movies to help our parents buy our school uniforms. When I was 12 years old, I started learning English. I started taking ESL classes and became the translator for my family. It was fun. I got to order food, and I also got to translate the bills that our family could soon be evicted. When I was 15, I visited college for the first time. I was excited, and I came home and told my dad, mi papá, Dad, one day I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get my degree. And my dad, I just remember seeing his eyes were watering. I said, mijo, las hijas y los hijos de mis patrones go to college. The son and daughters of my bosses go to college. Soon later, at age 17, I'm sitting at the curb of McDonald's, hacking into their Wi-Fi with a laptop that wasn't mine, applying to scholarships in colleges that I couldn't even pronounce their name. My SAT didn't tell my story, but I kept fighting. I kept dreaming. At age 18, I walked to the front gates of Georgetown University with my clothes and trash bags, and my wallet was empty. I thought I had a full ride. They didn't include sheets and a pillow, but they believed in me. And today, I'm 24 years old, and I'm standing here in front of you in a suit and a tie. Not only because I know that I look good, but I want other kids from the hood to be able to see themselves in me. And si se puede is a statement that guides my life. It means yes, we can. And every time I hesitate to pick up a book, I remember how many times my dad had to pick up a mop or my mom had to pick up the boxes for me to learn. Every time I hesitate to participate in class, I remember the immigration officers that raided our apartment looking for my documented family. And I would see them yell to my parents, stop crossing our border. I didn't know about laws. The only border that I knew of was the bridge that divided the shiny downtown buildings to the inner city of Oak Cliff. Every time my professors shredded my papers with academic feedback, I wanted to give up. But I would remember seeing my dad cry when we could not pay the rent, and I kept fighting. When applying to grad school, I knew my GRE score didn't tell my story again. But I couldn't stop fighting. All I could remember was the kids that I grew up with that remained hungry, that the school meals were the only meals. And as soon as the school found out, CPS took them away. Canicas, kickball, and loteria was never the same. So why am I here? I wrote notes because a lot of the times I get distracted with everything that I want to share. In the sense that a lot of the times I arrive, I'm learning. Education granted me my privilege to dream, and I'm learning about kids and communities that are vulnerable, and then you realize that that's you. And then how do you connect these bridges? How do you continue to break barriers? How do you dismantle a system that wasn't created for the most vulnerable? And at the same time, how do you keep the one thing that your father asked you to, which is your integrity? And at this point, I have decided that on the first day of my classes here at grad school, my professor Dr. Alonso said, I can walk into a room and recognize the room. That's great, but what if I walk in the room, know how to read the room, and be the most prepared person in the room? I'm here to be a leader of a system. I'm here to represent las voces que no se escuchan. But beyond that, my story is about a kid from the hood who believed that an education will grant him his freedom. And I can tell you that I am that risk that is worth taking. And last but not least, there are so many kids that remain with so many dreams. And I will continue to fight for those dreams because I am deeply grateful for everyone else that has fought for mine. Si se puede. Thank you.
So it wasn't until I became an educator that I realized what it felt like to feel frustrated. That feeling, I'm talking about that feeling when you are so frustrated and so angry and so appalled at the insanity that surrounds you that you don't know who's going to listen to you, you don't know who cares, and you're so overwhelmed that in the end you just feel hopeless. So as a teacher, I felt like that frequently at my DC public charter school. Usually, when I felt that way, I would tell myself to suck it up and finish lesson planning. But on one day, this was about a year ago, last fall, after an especially challenging few weeks at my school and in my personal life, instead of doing that, I opted to take the time and energy to write a letter to myself, trying to put into words what I felt in my mind. I actually have that letter here. I've changed the names of my students, but otherwise this is that same letter that I wrote just over a year ago, September 2015, in a moment when I felt frustrated. To whom it may concern, I am tired. I'm tired of waking up at 4:30 a.m. in order to do more work. I'm tired of not checking my phone until 7 p.m. when I see voicemails from my doctors and nurses about blood tests and biopsies that I won't be able to call back about until the next business day, when I won't have time again. I'm tired of lying in my bed at night with a ball of stress hovering in my chest, letting me know that I am not wholly prepared to teach yet again the next day. I'm tired of seeing kids get away with behavior that is wholly unacceptable for a place we call a school. If I may, I would like to share some highlights from my day. Period 1, I don't remember. It seems like Imani gave me a hug, or was that when I saw her at the end of the day? AP Language tricks me into thinking I teach at a school that cares about its students. Period 2, Randy Robbins, lying about gum again. Stephen describing a former teacher as a fat lesbian, and not that it matters, but she's neither fat nor a lesbian. Is anyone excited for my field trip tomorrow to see Al Gore, Colin Powell, and Cory Booker, not to mention Arnie Duncan, Mitt Romney, and Madeleine Albright? Lunch. Mr. Perkins and I have a nice 2-minute chat at the copy machine. I mentioned that Lamar's not happy with me because I called his dad. He mentioned that Lamar just walked past him in the hallways and said, "Get out of my hallways, Will." Period 3, hurricane. Of 28 students, one of whom has a BIP, 13 with IEPs, one of whom was just moved from self-contained into my classroom. No explanation as to why or how I should help him deal with that transition. The number of curse words I hear is difficult to say. We probably have 2 to 5 students regularly out of the classroom. Ray went to the bathroom and never came back, which is deja vu. The day before, she told me to get out of her face, that she didn't give a fuck, and then she was told to leave class early too. But here she was back in class. Did I get an apology? Take a guess. Our senior director of teaching and learning observed and might have more detailed notes. Period 4, Sierra chooses not to sit in her correct seat. Lamar and I witness a fight in the hallway during our one-on-one about his new seating arrangement. Nate uses his pen to fix the F on Ishmael's arm. Somewhere in all the commotion, the message had been obscured to read, "Uck off." We have a fire drill. Does anyone remember when fire drills were silent? Period 5, Simone answers a question using Issa's accent. Issa calls George a monkey. George calls Issa an immigrant. Someone writes on George's paper, "fat fuck." And Lily's not in class again, but she was at D'Angelo's locker before class. Period 6, I was asked to be the advisor for a program that will really make my school look good. Book club at the Library of Congress. I went there to meet with librarians about the program, a field trip to functioning civil society, if you will. I can see how they may have been alarmed to meet me. young, white 20-something with acne like a teen, glistening face like it's 100 degrees outside, an outfit that does not seem to be on par with my chaperone from central office. Oh, and want to hear the good news? It is cancer.
It all started with a dream. I was in high school. I walked into my mom's room and it was raining and I saw that she was crying. And so I called out to her and I was like, "Mommy, what's going on? Why are you crying?" And she looked at me and she said, "I'm not your real mother." And I looked at her and I started crying and I ran down the stairs and I ran outside and the rain just poured all over me. And I woke up. A week later, I had a continuation of that dream. And I had just gotten out of the house and the rain is still hitting me. And I jump into a car and I start driving and I get into an accident. And I open the driver's door and I fall out and I see this car pulling up and it stops and I see my family members and my mom comes up and she tries to pick me up and she's like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I pushed her away and I said, "Why do you even care? You're not my real mom." And I woke up. 2 weeks into college, I discovered something. Now, growing up, I was told that my father passed away when I was 2. But when I got to college, I found out something very different. 2 weeks in, I discovered that the person who I thought was my sister is actually my biological mother. Which meant the person who I thought was my mom, she was my biological grandmother. Which meant the person who I thought was my father that I was told passed away when I was 2, he was my biological grandfather. Which means my biological father, he's out there. He's just never been there for me. I lost 20 pounds in college within my first month. I started feeling really crappy about myself. I was self-loathing. I hated the fact that I was a seed of this guy. And I remember there was this trough that I had where I didn't know who to turn to. And I grabbed the Quran and I was like, "All right, God, if you're really up there, I've been a pretty decent guy my entire life. Please tell me something." And so I opened the Quran, I pointed to a random verse, and the verse said, "God does not put a burden on you which you cannot handle." And I felt cared for. And I felt like there was someone out there that made me feel like I mattered. And so I was like, "All right, let's go to class. Let's make this work." And I started getting really self-conscious in class too, because I was the one student of color, and all of my classes, it felt like I was the only one or one of very few. And everybody had brilliant things to say, and I didn't feel like I had brilliant things to say. So on a really subconscious level, I did something that was deeply problematic, where I started connecting race to intelligence. And then there was this one class with Professor Ian Smith. You know how you have that moment in class where the professor asks a question and you know the answer, right? And you get like really excited, right? Because you're like, "Yeah, I know the answer," right? And then you like second guess yourself because you look around and nobody else is raising their hand, right? And you're like, "Oh my God, nobody knows this?" And then you like feel that comfort again. You're like, "Nah, I got this," right? And so I raised my hand for like the first time in college, and I answered the question. And Professor Smith was like, "Yes," and he weaved that into the rest of the class. And then he was like, "Taha, I want you to wait after class." And I felt really scared, and I felt really vulnerable, and I was like, "What did I do? Why did I say anything?" And I went to him, and I was like, "Professor, you asked me to wait after class." And he was like, "Yeah, Taha, You have great things to say. You should speak up more in class. He didn't know what I was going through. He didn't know that I didn't have a family anymore. He didn't know that I didn't know where I came from. He just told me that I mattered. I went to his office hours every single week. I was on texting terms with this guy. I went to dinner with this guy. I saw the movie Inception with this guy, right? Right? And until this day, I still talk to him. I graduated 5 years ago. And now when I call him or when I get that text message from him and I pop open my phone, I see his contact. His name is saved as Pops. Thank you.
So I sort of hate to have to say anything at this point and break the spell of those incredible stories. We started this in recognition of the fact that everyone here has a story and that they deserve to be told and to be heard. And I want to begin by thanking all of those who gave us the gift of their stories. Thank you so much. I also want to thank those who helped organize this event, including Matt Weber, who did double duty as a storyteller as well, Aman Rastagari, Liz Thurston, and Brendan Russell. I want to thank the selection committee as well for bringing these great stories to us, as well as those who also participated. And I want to let you know that there will be another one of these events next semester. So for those of you who are sitting in the audience now thinking that you would like to tell your story as well, I hope you'll take this opportunity. But more generally, I hope you'll take the opportunity to tell your stories, whether on this stage or not, and that you'll take the opportunity to hear the stories of others. I am never, this is my favorite hour of the semester as well, because it reminds me how incredibly fortunate I am to be a part of this truly remarkable community. So thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks again to those who told their stories. And I want to invite all of you to a reception across the street at Gutman. So thanks, and one more round of applause for all of you.